In the unforgiving world of classic Hollywood, you had your titans and you had your jesters. And then you had Don Rickles. He was in a category all his own. Rickles was a comedian armed not with punchlines, but with poison darts. They called him the Merchant of Venom, Mr. Warmth, the insult king from Queens. His attacks were legendary, his timing impeccable. He could dismantle a celebrity's ego in seconds, leaving audiences howling, caught somewhere between shock and pure delight. No one was safe, from the biggest movie stars to the quiet guy in the third row. But for all the hockey pucks and dummies he eviscerated on stage, there was one man whose presence seemed to ignite a special kind of fire in Rickles. One legend who, by all accounts, should have been completely untouchable. When it came to Frank Sinatra, the jokes just felt different. They seemed personal. They almost seemed like hate. On stage, in front of millions, Rickles would look the most powerful man in entertainment in the eye and unload a barrage of insults that would have gotten any other man a one-way ticket to the bottom of the Las Vegas desert. For years, audiences believed this was a genuine feud, a dangerous game of chicken between a comedian and a king. But they never saw what happened after the curtain fell. What if the man Rickles seemed to hate the most was actually the one he respected above all others? This is the real story behind the most savage friendship in Hollywood. Before he was Mr. Warmth, Don Rickles was just a kid from Jackson Heights, Queens, the only child of Jewish parents, Max and Etta. He didn't dream of comedy. He wanted to be a serious, dramatic actor. After serving in the U.S. Navy during World War II, he got out in 1946 and used his GI Bill benefits to enroll at the prestigious American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He walked the same halls as future legends like Grace Kelly, Anne Bancroft, and Jason Robards. But Rickles struggled to find his footing. Frustrated by the lack of acting work, he started taking odd jobs, selling everything from life insurance to cosmetics, but he couldn't shake the call of the spotlight. He started doing comedy in small clubs in New York and Miami, but his act was pretty tame. A collection of pre-written jokes that weren't exactly setting the world on fire. The birth of the legend didn't come from some stroke of genius. It came from pure, unfiltered frustration. You know how hecklers are, the bane of every comedian's existence? Well, for Rickles, they became his secret weapon. When audience members interrupted his set, something inside him just snapped. He'd fire back, not with a clever comeback, but with a torrent of personal, off-the-cuff insults. And a strange thing happened. The audiences loved it. They laughed harder at his spontaneous attacks than they ever did at his prepared stuff. Realizing he was on to something, Rickles leaned in hard. He started calling people hockey pucks, a phrase that would become his trademark. His act became a chaotic, thrilling event built entirely on roasting the crowd. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was creating a moment. He'd walk out on stage to a bullfight theme, scan the crowd, and lock onto his first victim. His comedy was a high-wire act without a net, completely ad-libbed and dangerously unpredictable. He went after people's looks, their dates, their jobs. Nothing was off-limits. But here's the thing. It wasn't really malicious. As one critic noted, Rickles made fun of all the things you're not supposed to make fun of, and in doing so, he took the power away from them with overwhelming humor. Still, for years he was a grinder, playing small rooms, struggling to make a name for himself. By 1957, he was at a small club in Miami Beach, still waiting for that big break. He was a performer with a uniquely volatile act, waiting for the right spark to set his career ablaze. That spark was about to walk through the door, and he was the one man in the world you just didn't insult. To really get how huge this moment was, you have to understand who Frank Sinatra was in 1957. He wasn't just a singer. He wasn't just an actor. He was an institution. Born to Italian immigrants in Hoboken, New Jersey, Francis Albert Sinatra had clawed his way to the absolute top of the entertainment world. In the 40s, his smooth baritone sparked Sinatra mania, with hordes of screaming Bobby Soxers fainting at his shows. He was old Blue Eyes, the voice, the chairman of the board. But his career also hit rock bottom. By the early 1950s, his records weren't selling, his TV show was canceled, and a vocal cord hemorrhage nearly destroyed his voice. The industry had written him off. Then came the comeback of all comebacks, his raw, desperate performance as Private. Angelo Maggio in the 1953 film From Here to Eternity didn't just earn him praise, it earned him an Academy Award and shot him right back to the top of the A-list. By the late 50s, Sinatra was more powerful than ever. He was a top-selling artist, a massive movie star, and the undeniable center of the Rat Pack. He held court in Las Vegas, the desert town he helped turn into the entertainment capital of the world. But that power came with a legendary temper. Sinatra was a man of incredible charm, but he lived in daily fear of humiliation and did not tolerate disrespect. Crossing him, even by accident, could be a career-ending move. He was surrounded by an entourage, and stories of his quick temper were whispered all over Hollywood. He was, in every sense of the word, untouchable. Insulting Frank Sinatra wasn't just a bad idea, it was professional suicide, which makes what happened next so terrifying and so brilliant. The year was 1957. The place was Murray Franklin's, a nightclub in Miami Beach. Don Rickles was on stage, spraying the audience with insults. It was just another night. But then, a ripple went through the room. Frank Sinatra had just walked in. As the story goes, the meeting wasn't pure chance. Rickles' mother, Etta, had reportedly met Sinatra's mother, Dolly, and convinced her to get her famous son to check out Don's act. Rickles spotted him, and his blood ran cold. He knew the stories. Every survival instinct screamed at him to play it safe, to be polite, to maybe just ignore the most famous man in the room. But the comedian in him, the entire act he'd built from years of failure, wouldn't let him. This was the ultimate test. The entire room held its breath. Rickles looked Sinatra dead in the eye, and his voice cut through the silence. "I just saw your movie, The Pride and the Passion, and I want to tell you, the Cannon's acting was great." The crowd tittered nervously. Then came the line that would change his life forever. He paused, then added, "Make yourself at home, Frank. Hit somebody." The silence in that club was deafening. Everyone, Rickles included, stared at Sinatra's table, expecting an explosion. This was it. Rickles later joked, "If he didn't laugh, I'd be on the Jerry Lewis telethon." But Sinatra didn't get mad. He didn't call over the muscle. Instead, a slow smile spread across his face, and then he just roared with laughter. He threw his head back and howled, and the tension in the room shattered into a wave of relieved, uproarious laughter. A legend was born, and a lifelong friendship was forged. Sinatra didn't just tolerate being insulted, he loved it. He saw something fearless and authentic in Rickles. Here was a guy who dared to treat him not as an icon, but as just another hockey puck in the audience. From that night on, Sinatra became Don Rickles' biggest fan and most powerful champion. He told all his famous friends, Dean Martin, Sammy, Davis Jr., Johnny Carson, that they had to see this bullet head who had the guts to mock him to his face. Celebrities started flocking to Rickles' shows, not in spite of the insults, but because of them. Getting roasted by Rickles became a badge of honor, a sign that you'd really made it. And it was all because he took the biggest risk of his career and aimed his venom at the king. If you're enjoying this look into one of Hollywood's most surprising friendships, take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We dive into the hidden stories of classic Hollywood every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, back to how a savage insult blossomed into a legendary bond. Publicly, Don Rickles was the merchant of venom, a man who seemed to despise everyone he talked to. The myth was that his on-stage feud with Sinatra was real. The truth? It was the exact opposite. Their friendship wasn't just for show. It was deep, loyal, and full of affection. Sinatra's laughter that first night was the start of decades of mutual admiration. Sinatra championed Rickles relentlessly. He'd show up at his gigs, sit in the front row, and eagerly await the insults. His presence alone was an endorsement that money couldn't buy. It was Sinatra who helped Rickles become a headliner in Vegas, a move that cemented his career. He became the court jester to the Rat Pack, the one guy who could bring them all down to earth with a single line. One of their most famous stories, a classic Rickles probably polished over the years, perfectly captures their dynamic. Rickles was on a date, trying to impress a woman who didn't believe he actually knew Sinatra. Seeing Frank across the restaurant, Rickles walked over and said, "Frank, do me a favor. I'm with this girl. In a few minutes, could you just come by the table and say hello?" Sinatra agreed. A few minutes later, he strolled over and warmly said, "Don, how are you? So great to see you." Without missing a beat, Rickles shot him a look of disgust and snapped, "Not now, Frank. Can't you see I'm eating?" Sinatra was left standing there speechless before breaking into laughter. It was a prank so audacious that Sinatra told the story. Himself for years, their bond went far beyond pranks. When Sinatra's beloved mother, Dolly, died in a plane crash in 1977, he was devastated. He holed himself up, refusing to speak to anyone. Friends and dignitaries from around the world called, but Frank took no calls. Then, Don Rickles called. Sinatra's right-hand man said, "Frank, it's Don." And Sinatra took the call. He didn't want sympathy. He just wanted his friend. For an hour, Rickles just talked to him, not about grief, but about anything and everything, making him laugh, pulling him out of the darkness. The man who roasted him in public was the one he turned to for comfort in private. This duality was the real Don Rickles. His best friend, the famously gentle comedian Bob Newhart, knew this well. Newhart and Rickles, and their wives, would travel the world together. Newhart recalled warning his wife, Ginny, that the Don she met at dinner was very different from the one on stage. Sure enough, that night, Rickles' opening line was, "The stammering idiot from Chicago is in the audience with his hooker wife from Bayonne." Yet, beneath that savage exterior, was a man Newhart called his dearest friend. Rickles confirmed it himself. At a Dean Martin celebrity roast for Sinatra in 1978, after a string of brutal jokes, his tone changed completely. He looked at Frank and said with total sincerity, "We do not dance together. We do not break bread every day together. But when I'm in his company, I speak of him with love. And I tell you, we have been blessed to have such a man." That was the truth. The hate was a performance. The love was real. When you understand their friendship, it completely changes how you see Rickles' comedy. What looked like pure venom was actually a kind of insider's handshake. To be publicly insulted by Rickles wasn't a punishment. It was a sign you were in the club. It meant you were important enough to be noticed and secure enough to take a joke. Sinatra, the most secure man in showbiz, understood this better than anyone. There's a theory in comedy called benign violation. The idea is that a joke works when it breaks a rule, like being disrespectful, but in a way that isn't actually threatening. Rickles' insults were clear violations, but the context made them harmless. The target, the audience, and Rickles himself all knew it wasn't coming from a place of genuine malice. This shared understanding turned what could have been an offense into comedy gold. Rickles always hated the label insult comic, insisting his humor was never about hate. His relationship with Sinatra was the ultimate proof. Sinatra gave Rickles an exclusive target. No one else dared to go after old Blue Eyes. In return, Rickles gave Sinatra something priceless, a public sense of humor. He made the larger-than-life icon seem human, showing the world that the powerful chairman of the board could laugh at himself. Their joint appearances on The Tonight Show were legendary events, a perfect storm of Sinatra's cool and Rickles' chaos. When Rickles would crash a Sinatra interview, the audience knew they were about to witness television at its most electric. This friendship cemented Rickles's legacy. He wasn't just another comic. He was the man who could make Frank Sinatra laugh. He was the court jester who had earned the king's respect and affection. He became Mr. Warmth, a nickname that began as a joke but ended up being the perfect description of the man behind the mask. He built a career pretending to hate people, but was, in reality, beloved by those he targeted the most. So the story of Don Rickles and Frank Sinatra isn't just a bunch of funny anecdotes. It's a masterclass in friendship, respect, and the hidden language of comedy. The public saw a feud. They saw what looked like pure hatred. But backstage, away from the cameras, it was a story of unwavering loyalty and genuine love. Sinatra didn't just put up with Rickles. He championed him, he protected him, and he loved him. And Rickles, the so-called merchant of venom, used his unique humor not to wound, but as his own strange way of showing admiration. The man everyone thought Don Rickles hated more than anyone was, in truth, the man who made his career possible, and the friend he cherished most. Their friendship reminds us that sometimes the most savage insults are just another way of saying, "I love you." Hey, thanks for watching. If you're looking for another story about an unlikely Hollywood friendship, check out our video on the surprising bond between two other screen legends right here. And don't forget to subscribe for more hidden stories from Hollywood's golden age. We'll see you in the next one.